Thank you, Eurasia Research Group, for having me here today as a keynote speaker. So my name is Reese, Wong, and I'm based here in Hong Kong, where I am the founder of ISSIA HK, a youth-led nonprofit that aims to advance global citizenship and empower changemakers for peer-to-peer and project-based learning. So for this talk, I want to sort of illustrate the power of global citizenship education and the work we're doing to contribute a little bit to this area. And I want to talk more about the power of youth change making and why it is so important that we build towards a world where everyone is a change maker. So firstly, a brief introduction about myself. I found myself to be a very academically oriented individual a few years back, but I felt boxed in and I felt that I wasn't given ownership over my own learning journey. That all changed when I did an internship at a mental health charity, which taught me all about the power of peer-to-peer and project-based learning. That is learning by doing. And that experience really catalyzed my own personal transformation and my own change-making journey. So as a result, I founded the organization ISSIA HK, which is now spawned from an organization of just a few people working on a magazine to an organization that now involves over 300 aspiring change makers across 80 schools here in the Asia Pacific. But back to that internship experience, it sparked a greater realization in terms of what we need in our education systems today. Firstly, I think it is well acknowledged that our world is rapidly changing at an accelerated pace, but at the same time, education as a system, as a sector, hasn't really kept up. And educational innovation just isn't keeping up with the demands and the changes in 21st century needs. And with COVID, we've seen that young people are facing an even greater and more unprecedented skills gap. So we here at ISSIA provide a different kind of education, one that is peer-to-peer and project-based. So our focus is on giving students agency over their own learning journeys. So we do this over two ways. One is information empowerment. So for our multimedia initiatives, be it podcasts, docuseries, or magazines, we give young people the information, the knowledge to thrive in this ever-changing world. Secondly, we focus on capacity building. We provide young people workshops and trainings to prepare them with 21st century skills. And all of this is done in a peer-to-peer and project-based environment, meaning young people have the autonomy to ideate or conceive, execute, and then scale their own projects and initiatives. And we found that over time, this has really helped develop themselves as leaders, as change makers, and also as global citizens. And we think that this model is something I think that is really worth considering in terms of how we can integrate it into traditional education and how we can advance this model of peer-to-peer and project-based learning for other sort of cross-sector partnerships. But again, so over the past 3 years, ISSIA HK has involved over 300 aspiring change makers across 70 schools here in the Asia Pacific, and we've actually launched over 30 projects around the 3 SDGs on quality education, decent work and economic growth, and partnership for the goals. And we believe that it is quite critical to get young people really engaged with the sustainable development goals through project-based learning, because we found that it actually gets them invested in these SDGs. It actually gets them learning a lot in a really short period of time, because they have to take ownership over the project from start to finish. So a few different case studies here. One of our flagship projects is the Isia Magazine. So it's this youth-led, youth-operated publication where young people can come together and create a magazine from scratch, essentially, playing the role of both the editorial board, playing the role of the design team, the typesetting team, every single function of a publication. So how it works is when a writer signs up to our organization, they get onboarded for a 1-week sort of training, but then they get paired up with an editor, and they then work collaboratively together to develop an article. And the editor, who's their peer, maybe 1 or 2 years older, provides guidance and feedback into how you can make a more robust argument, how you can create a more impactful story, how can you interweave sources and different narratives. And we found that this peer-to-peer process is really powerful in building a relationship and a camaraderie between peers, but again, advancing these 21st century skills. Essentially, it's one-to-one mentorship. And we think that that's actually a very effective delivery model. There's much to learn, even amongst peers. Of course, as you can see, we also have a lot of other multimedia initiatives where we see that increasingly all around the world, young people are really utilizing social media and different multimedia tools to create an impact and share about social change. And of course, we also have our events, be it in person or digital, whereby we bring together these young change makers for sessions of upskilling, capacity building, bringing them insights from experts, ultimately, again, advance this idea of information empowerment, but also to build and further build an ecosystem of these young change makers. So one of our most notable events actually was this UN World Youth Skills Day, where we brought together 20 leading young change makers here in Hong Kong for a day of upskilling and troubleshooting, where all of these young people have their amazing initiatives and amazing projects and organizations. And we had them share about what challenges they were facing as young people trying to create social impact and social change. And it was almost like a support group or a support network or an ecosystem of these young people working towards these different sustainable development goals. And this has been a really important area of our work in terms of building an ecosystem of these amazing young people. So in terms of our future plans as an organization, we're really looking to expand our footprint internationally, but also continually work with schools to advance this model of peer-to-peer and project-based learning. And again, as I mentioned, we really want to build an ecosystem of these young change makers. We're also, of course, exploring new delivery models, particularly through virtual reality and VR, and how VR could, for example, connect students across the world through, again, peer-to-peer and project-based learning. So my call to action here is we're currently looking for partners to really co-create with us to create synergies for our sustainable development goals. But more broadly, I want to sort of zoom out and sort of talk about youth change making more broadly and the really need for youth change making here in the 21st century. So again, what we've seen over the past few years increasingly are that young people, especially Gen Z, are really change and action oriented. And they have been utilizing digital tools like social media to create campaigns for social change and campaigns for the sustainable development goals more broadly. And what we've seen, therefore, is this idea of social impact has become more and more decentralized and democratized, meaning that everyone can in some way participate in social impact across different ladders of participation. And we found that over the past few years, because these barriers to entry are so low, more and more young people are starting their own social impact projects, social entrepreneurial ventures, and again, rapidly upskilling themselves in the world of work and the future of work. So they're taking ownership over massive youth-led organizations and movements. And this has really developed their skill sets and connected them with a global community of like-minded change makers. So we think that there's a lot of untapped potential there in terms of not just the power of young people, but the role of young people in the social impact sector. So I also work at Ashoka, which is one of the world's largest community of social entrepreneurs. One of our recent focuses has been on this idea of redefining success in terms of growing up, right? I think traditionally success has been parameterized in a certain way about academic success, job success, but we want to create a world where young people grow up as change makers, where eventually, everyone is a change maker in their ecosystem and in our world. Because again, the world is rapidly changing, and that requires a concerted effort from all sectors and all ladders of participation to really generate and systematize impact. Again, one thing I want to mention again is this idea that the whole is more than the sum of its parts. One of my favorite quotes, because we can do so much more together. I think whether you're a researcher, an educator, a young person, there's always some way for us to connect and build upon each other's strengths. So I think especially in this ecosystem of youth change making, I think there's such a large portion of potential that is still currently untapped. And I think my sort of exhortation to educators is to think about when you're trying to incorporate global issues into your classroom, or just more broadly, global citizenship education, what are some ways to really tap into this sort of youth change-making ecosystem and really get more young people working on peer-to-peer and project-based learning, really giving them these experiential learning experiences and help them prepare for the future of work in a world that is rapidly changing. So I think, again, there's so much potential in global citizenship education, and especially in this decentralized model. So I'm really interested in exploring these further opportunities. But again, if you want to learn more about our work, you can find us on ISSIAHK.org to see our previous projects and initiatives. But I'd be happy to answer any questions. And again, thank you for your time and for listening to my sharing about, again, how we can advance global citizenship education through peer-to-peer and project-based learning.